Absolutely. Here is a polished read-aloud synopsis, keeping your information in structure while making it flow naturally as narration. The neoclassical naming boom in upstate New York is one of the most fascinating intersections of American history and classical literature. Following the Revolutionary War, New York State set aside more than 1.5 million acres, known as the Military Tract, to compensate soldiers who had served in the Continental Army. When Surveyor General Simeon DeWitt, working alongside officials such as Robert Harpur, began mapping the territory in the 1780s and 1790s, they divided the land into 28 enormous townships, which were eventually subdivided into smaller lots. But instead of simply numbering these townships or giving them ordinary local names, the surveyors created something extraordinary. They covered the map with names drawn from ancient Greece, Rome, classical mythology, English literature, philosophy, and military history. In effect, they created a classical scholar's dream dictionary across central New York. The epic quartet. Perhaps the most remarkable example is the connection between Troy and Ithaca. There is a Troy on the Hudson River, while Ithaca sits within the town of Ulysses in Tompkins County. Ulysses is the Latin name for Odysseus, the hero of Homer's Odyssey. And nearby, the original military tract contains names such as Homer and Hector. So across the landscape of New York, the names of the Trojan War and Homer's epic became permanently embedded in the American landscape. It almost feels as though the geography itself is inviting us to imagine an American version of Odysseus's journey. Literary giants. The classical naming went far beyond Homer. Townships and communities were named after some of history's greatest poets, writers, philosophers, and statesmen. There was Homer, the legendary Greek epic poet, Virgil, author of the Aeneid, Ovid, the great Roman poet of the Augustan period, Milton, referring to John Milton, author of Paradise Lost, Dryden, named for the English poet, playwright, and translator John Dryden, and Locke, honoring the Enlightenment philosopher John Locke. There were also names taken directly from ancient Greek philosophy and politics, including Solon, the famous Athenian lawmaker and statesman. Generals, statesmen, and heroes. The military tract also celebrated legendary figures from ancient history. Lysander, the Spartan general, Hannibal, the great Carthaginian commander, Scipio, the Roman general who defeated Hannibal, Fabius, famous for the delaying strategy that became known as the Fabian strategy, Marcellus, the Roman general who conquered Syracuse, Pompey, or Pompey the Great, the Roman general and statesman, and Cincinnatus, the Roman leader remembered for accepting extraordinary power to save Rome, then voluntarily giving it up and returning to his farm, a powerful symbol of Republican civic virtue. Other Roman names included Cato, Brutus, Camillus, Cicero, Manlius, Aurelius, Romulus, Sempronius, Tully, and Junius. And then there was Galen, the ancient Greek physician and philosopher. Finally, Stirling, added later in 1795, honored Lord Stirling, William Alexander, a major general in the Continental Army. The 28 original townships, together these names formed the original military tract roster: Lysander, Hannibal, Cato, Camillus, Cicero, Manlius, Aurelius, Marcellus, Pompey, Romulus, Scipios, Sempronius, Fabius, Ovid, Milton, Locke, Homer, Solon, Hector, Ulysses, Dryden, Virgil, Cincinnatus, Junius, Galen, and Stirling. These were not merely poetic names. They were the names of enormous original townships laid out across central New York. Over time, those giant townships were subdivided, reorganized, and transformed into the modern towns, villages, and cities that exist today. The classical grid today. You can still see the legacy on a modern map. Homer and Cortlandville were carved from the original township of Homer. Auburn and Cayuga lie within the historic bounds of Aurelius. Skaneateles sits largely within the original township of Marcellus. Ithaca and Trumansburg are located within the original township of Ulysses. And Syracuse grew from territory associated with the original townships of Salina and Manlius, with Salina itself having been carved from earlier territory associated with Cicero and Manlius. So the next time you drive through central New York, you're not simply traveling through ordinary American towns. You're traveling through a classical grid. You can pass from a place named after a Roman emperor into a place named after a Greek poet, then toward a town named after a Trojan prince, and eventually arrive at Ithaca inside Ulysses. It is one of the strangest and most beautiful historical accidents, or perhaps deliberate acts of imagination, in the American landscape. The ancient Mediterranean world was mapped onto the forests and farmland of New York. And centuries later, the names are still there. Homer, Hector, Ulysses, Virgil, Cicero, Hannibal, Scipio. A classical world permanently preserved, not in marble ruins, but on the road signs of upstate New York. This version is paced for documentary/audiobook narration, with the names and transitions given enough space to land naturally.